So, okay. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Shenomics Mentoring Circle this Saturday. We're really happy to have you all here. And a special welcome to some of our new friends who joined us and to let them know a little bit more about Shenomics. Shenomics is a mindful leadership platform for women where we support them with our various programs to find out how they can actually live in their best version and also live and lead consciously. We have several programs which you can find more on our website. You can go to shenomics.com. We have one-on-one and group coaching and mentoring programs. We have fellowships like Lead Like a Girl, which is for younger women who are between the age group of 21 and 30. We also have a very special program for women who are a little bit more and have older and have spent significant years in the workforce, like above 12, called the Conscious Woman Program. And of course, you can sign up for our newsletter, which is always filled with very rich content. And we're finding different ways to actually reach out to you to actually find more meaningful methods on helping you join this journey of conscious living and leading. And one of our programs is also the Shenomics Mentoring Circle, which is fairly popular. And this is our way of bringing together guest experts, business leaders, conscious living coaches, or experts who really come in this setting and show us or guide us on topics which will help you lead a better and authentic life in your personal and your professional space. And today we've chosen one of the topics which is much talked about, very important, and much needed, personal branding. And we've spoken about this before, but today's twist is really we're focusing on breaking some of the stereotype notions that we have around personal branding and actually showing you how that personal branding is possible for each one of us in whatever stage of life we're at or whatever skill sets we do have. Sure, we can add on a few more, where it really doesn't matter if you're an extrovert or an introvert or what age you're at, or if whether you're still growing in your career or you've actually achieved enough or not achieved enough. We're all at different stages, but the thing is we each can do it because your personal brand is really about you. And on that note, I would also like to introduce and welcome our guest expert for today, Kaushi Biddappa. Welcome, Kaushi. And a little bit about Kaushi. Kaushi has over 17 years of work experience, and she's worked with global brands like AOL and General Motors. And in 2019, she actually started her own journey, and she started as a personal branding consultant and a leadership communications coach. And her main focus is really that while she's finding her own definition of success, she's very keen to actually help others find their meaning of success. So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Kaushi. But before we do, I just want to remind you all that all of you all that have joined us, we have a special bonus for our attendees today, that we will be selecting 2 lucky winners, and they will get a one-on-one mentoring session on personal branding in the area of managing up by Kaushi. So please do stay till the end. And I'm leaving you with one question. So please leave your answer in the chat, that who all have their birthdays in the month of May. All right, over to you, Kaushi.
Thank you, Charu. Good morning, everybody. And honestly and sincerely want to thank everyone for prioritizing Saturday morning to be a part of this community. And we start to understand when we say personal branding is intentional living. And I like the way Charu highlighted that, exploring my definition of success. And I think a little context would mean is, sometimes in the world that we live in, it's the titles, it's the way we progress in our careers and relationships, all that are deeply impactful. But I think at the end of the day, some of us truly, truly forget that what is the relationship we share with ourselves? Do we know ourselves really well? And I think the cause for misery, right, and suffering is the lack of understanding of ourselves. I think some of the greatest leaders say that you will spend years studying physics, chemistry, biology, But if you're told to sit down 15 minutes with yourself every day, okay, 15 minutes, not much, every day, you're like, what a waste of time. Like, really, I don't have the time for it. And I guess that's where we start the downward spiral. And this is where I found meaning in talking about personal branding is intentional living, because another dialogue that a lot of us deal with is, I'm an introvert and hence I'm shy, or I'm shy and guess what, I'm an introvert. But this is the misconception, and I want to start addressing this right before we dive into the session, because something that in my own journey I discovered is like, for the longest time I thought I was an extrovert, didn't realize that I was put in positions in places where I had to speak up, and over a period of time you build comfort. So which means that the great possibility that after I've had this discussion, I'm going to retrieve into my shell and spend time on reflections. So if there is an audience out here feeling that, I'm an introvert, I'm not comfortable doing this, let me tell you, that is the premise for great conversations and reflections. Okay. And it's really about playing to your strengths and respecting your natural tendencies. So with that, I really want to welcome each one of you for prioritizing time again. And while I share the slides, I will go off camera because of bandwidth issues. But when I know I have a little more detailed conversation to have, I will come on camera. So now I go off the video. And if you guys have any questions, you can share that. And I will see if it holds relevance to integrate that as part of the discussion, because it would address a larger audience. Or we could do this one-on-one, or I can park it for a later time during the session if time permits. So yeah, we good with that? I do see a lot of happy faces.
Yes.
And so I'm really, really grateful. There are a lot of people on camera. So I really, really appreciate that. And if people are not on camera, guess what? I'm not judging you guys. Oh, can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So something that I genuinely wanted to cover was personal branding is intentional living. And guess what? This tagline didn't happen overnight. When I started my journey a few years ago, I needed to give a tagline for the program that I was running, more in terms of how do I make myself memorable? Okay, so it started with something like personal brand made easy. Okay, sounds simple, but even to get to that space took a lot to walk through the discomfort. Then came, okay, Kaushi, now you've done this made easy, but how do you differentiate yourself? Why not make this fun? Then I moved into personal branding is edible, made edible. Personal branding made edible by Kaushi. Again, another version to that. Now I'm like, okay, this is fun, but maybe it may not appeal to all the audience. Kaushi, personal branding is inner knowing. Wow, that's depth. Everybody's talking about it like you're so on topic and trending. But I think, and why am I sharing this with you is, you don't get to the space of excellence right in the beginning. So don't dismiss yourself. Acknowledge every effort you put in every day. And then with time and months and years of understanding the subject and discovering myself in the process is when I realized, Kaushi, this is not about some crazy event or happening, but it's really about being intentional about each of your engagements every day. Okay, I'm just going to lay that out. It's about being intentional about each of your engagements every day. In your role as a child, to your parents, a partner, your significant other, or a parent yourself. And now extend that to work environment. You're playing different roles. So when we start becoming intentional about the way we want to engage, we also start showing up very differently. Okay. I love sharing this anecdote where, one of the disciples asked Buddha that, you radiate a certain glow. And what is the secret of that glow and radiance? And Buddha very humbly said, I'm awake. So you see, it's as simple as in the journey that where we are just following trends and people, what it would mean to spend 15 minutes with yourself every day just to know yourself. So that is where the whole essence of personal branding is intentional living comes into play. So that's my little personal story. Now, is that enough for me to have a narrative? No, there's data as well. So there is an interesting book, which is Empowering Yourself, which was published in 1996, which highlighted the essence of 3 factors for career success. And we'll get to that a little later. But do you see this whole context and concept came in much, much earlier. So it's not something that's trending lately and it's the influencer culture that's making it popular. This has existed in a different notion and flavor. Then comes Tom Peters, who was the pioneer for personal branding, who kind of created the manifesto, The Brand Called You. I'm sure you've heard this in different shapes or forms saying, the brand called you. And that is another indication why this discussion would drive so much more meaning and purpose. Then comes the Great Recession, which gave rise to the gig economy. If you guys happen to watch this TED talk by Tanya, the essence of her presentation is the future of branding is personal. Again, a very interesting, insightful presentation on why personal branding is so important, because during the recession, a lot of people were made redundant, and that's when they recognized that your skills are something that people need, and how do you monetize that? And of course, then comes 2019, the global pandemic. I think the lockdown was very indicative of what we started to do differently and what we need to drive differently. So as much as there is a narrative what intentional living is, there is enough data and research material to indicate why embarking on this journey is going to be a meaningful venture for you guys here. Now, a little interesting quiz here. You don't necessarily have to get it right, because the idea is not to know everything. But if I were to lay this out saying, what are key factors responsible for career success? And there are 3 key factors, okay? And this is in line with the book, Empowering Yourself. Again, I'm reiterating, we don't have to know everything, but it just helps to have an understanding of what the key factors are. And I'm going to give you a cue. The 3 factors have their response here. It's the pie, and each of the letters indicate a certain word and a characteristic trait. Do we want people in the audience taking a sense of what that could be? Guesses are absolutely fine. It's easy to go into a monologue mode. I'd love that, but I'd like to think an engagement of sorts would really help in driving purpose. And honestly, you know, guys, I also respect silence, so don't feel forced to do it.
Kaushi, we have responses in the chat. I'll just read them out.
Okay, yes.
Emotional intelligence, passion, image, productivity or performance, passion, intention, execution, or emotion, perseverance, integrity, empathy, inspiration, intention, purpose.
I love all the responses, because you know what? You guys have got to the response so beautifully. The only derivation is how this all kind of attributes to these 3 aspects is something that I want to acknowledge is P is for performance. I know someone really hit the nail on the head when they said image and exposure. And if you start to see this, it brought a lot of definition to my own journey, saying for a very long time, I was very happy saying, you know, Kaushi, you do your job well, and that's good enough, and it doesn't matter. But you realize doing your job well is not really the only parameter. There are other elements as well. How do people perceive you? Yeah, that's the image. And the other element is, are the decision makers and the stakeholders aware of your contribution? Does your work enjoy exposure? Does it enjoy visibility? So you see how important this is, because as much as there's a lot of importance on performance, and this is something that I always remind myself, it's 10%, but give it your 100%. There's no negotiation on that part. But where do we stand in the space of image and exposure? What do we do about ensuring people perceive us a certain way? And again, we start to see this as a very disingenuous effort because we think like, oh, now I have to fit in. I need to ensure this particular person likes me. So there's a lot of this feeling of manipulation, which is not what this is all about. It's really about knowing thyself, because that's where wisdom starts. So I want to lay this out for you guys so that you have a recollection of this pie here, right? The pie for career success, which is your performance, which is 10%, your image 30%, and exposure 60%. This has really helped me and a lot of people that I worked with to understand where are the gaps and what's the journey they need to travel. Now, one of the things that we often struggle with is, okay, personal brand, which means a lot of social media content, influencer culture, and we go into this constricted mode, cringe mode. But what if you are told that personal branding is about how do you create a difference? How can you add value? That's the mindset reset that we need to make. It's about, maybe it's the first meeting and you're creating those initial impressions, or it's that recurring meeting where you need to enable the people and also let them know what your contributions are. Whatever that event is, how do you show up? That's your personal brand, which is an interesting combination of the three elements: your uniqueness, your values, your contributions. And for me, what has really helped me understand this journey is, I remember sitting and listening to Benny Brown, who spoke about true belonging. And true belonging is, it's an interesting place to be in where you recognize the importance of being a part of something bigger, that sacredness. And also, if it does not align, are you willing to stand alone and drive change? And the intention is not so much about I will change the world. Let's not get that. I mean, I just think that can be misleading. The intention is, what are things that I will start changing about myself? How will I start showing up for myself? And I think I've heard people say a lot of times, Kaushi, we want to speak like you with a lot of confidence and the way you present. And let me tell you, this is not who I was a few years ago. I think when I was 19 and I was handed the mic, I was an utter blunder. I almost thought this person is never going to give me the mic back because I just didn't hold that whole forum well. But I think it's not giving up on yourself and making that effort. It's being intentional. And again, it comes back to how bad you want. So the folks in the room who, we find comfort in calling ourselves introvert, and I respect that, it's the space. You don't have to change yourself. But can you realign yourself in places where your work can make a difference, add value? I think the minute you start having the discussion about how can I make a difference? How can I add value? A lot of this will shift from, are people judging me? Or what is this about? Is this about me? No, it's about the message. It's about the message. The minute you get into that mode, all of this will slowly start to reflect. If you guys have any questions, you can lay it out, and Charlie, you can highlight that because that's important too. But I'm happy to continue sharing because my sense is we are in a good transition mode. And here's a picture of my mom here. And something that I noticed with her was, some of us tend to overthink. So I would give her this little assignment on start journaling, and it would give her comfort. And she has quite a few medical interventions, procedures, and surgeries to undergo the last week of this month. It also gives us comfort that you will be put in a situation, there will be events and challenges, but what do you learn from it? Because a lot of times something that I hear from people saying is, I don't have anything interesting to share, or I don't think I'm good enough to share, or I don't have anything valuable, or I'm just another person. It's amazing how we dismiss ourselves every day, every moment of the day, unless we start to recognize there's a challenge. How am I going through this? experience? What lessons am I picking up? And will these lessons add value to somebody else's life? Okay. Now, here's a little story I'm going to share about myself. This was not a cause that I was very passionate about. It was more work. When I say work, I would show up at work, understanding what personal branding is, show up, executive presence. I understood the nuances. I worked through the journey. But I just felt maybe this is something where I want to make a difference, because I remember a friend, this is a few years ago when I worked in the organization setup. She was great at her work, but she would get passed over for promotions. It somehow never happened. And she would come back and talk about, Kaushi, I didn't get promoted. This is just so unfair. And I would hold space for her. But I struggled to understand, why is this someone so good and excellent at their work and has all the qualities of emotional intelligence at a very high level, fails to create an impact? And that's when I recognize the importance of image and exposure. You see the 3 factors for career success, which we don't pay attention to because no one really tells us that. Because as children, we are taught, it's important to do your work hard, the results will come, empty vessels make the most noise, your work will do the talking. All of that is very, very good thought and belief. But if you change the context and the landscape, it may not necessarily work always. This is why I always remind myself, while we understand concepts, understand the context in which you're applying this. So that kind of gave me a sense of how, when you don't understand yourself, when there's no knowledge of who you are, it's very easy to be misled by people who tell you, you're not good enough, this is not great. While it's important to pay attention to feedback, knowing yourself is also very important. And, there was this whole phase of downward spiral, and things started to affect her personally. She carried a lot of resentment. She was very honest about her sharing. And I said, can I share your story? And I even wrote a story on it, right? In one of the books that I published recently. And I think there was a commitment made that I would start talking about the importance of speaking up for yourself, which has a huge connection to personal branding, because if you're not speaking up for yourself, no one else would do, at least in that initial phases. And that's why this is so important to recognize we all have a story. Our stories have a purpose. And when you make this about how can I make a difference in the other person's life, you will start journaling. And this is in context of people. I've often had people tell me, I'm not very comfortable writing. It's not my skill set. You know what? Guess what? The minute you say skill set, it's learnable. And it's not like I'm a great writer. I started to read, and I started to read and write and journal. And I remember having this conversation with Charu saying, you're put in spaces where you can't share your journey with people and you're struggling. And then you start writing it down, you journal. And then at some point in time, your voice emerges. It seriously does. I remember tuning into an interview. I don't know who the person is, but they made a very interesting point about Princess Diana when she was young, when she just got married. And as she matured in her space as a parent and a much older woman, her voice, the modulation of her voice slowly started to change. I think when you start getting comfortable with yourself, you'll also be able to express and articulate yourself better. So it's not an overnight journey. It's going to be an everyday practice. But again, it comes back to how badly you want it. So I repeat, when we dismiss ourselves as an introvert and I don't know how to network, I don't know how to show up, ask yourself, how can I make a difference? And you are so capable of having deeper conversations. And this is not to dismiss the extroverts here. This is no way to dismiss any of those qualities. It's absolutely admirable, right? But every time you fall into this, I'm an introvert, I'm a shy person, understand the difference between shyness and introversion. Introversion are people, and there's a study by Susan Cain, who's an expert on introversion, where she's written about shyness is the fear of negative judgment. Okay, there's a difference. And introversion is your natural tendency and fondness for less stimulating environments, and peace and quaintness and calm. So instead of judging yourself, just embrace yourself. And the example I often use in analogies like, if I would ask you, do you prefer tea or coffee? Would you like to have? What's your preference for beverage? I don't think I'm going to rattle away. It's like, you don't like tea? You like only coffee? And you're not going to judge yourself. You know what? I like tea. I don't like coffee. What will pick? I think just get to that analogy. That analogy has really helped me when I need to show up as my true self without needing to fit in. Like I said, true belonging is your essence where you feel that you can be part of something more sacred as a community, but you're absolutely okay to stand alone because you have a change to drive. So this is a framework that I think would help you on your journey. To all the ones who say, I'm not comfortable writing, maybe this is the framework you can start sharing. Even before you share it with anybody else, start doing this for yourself. So I'm just leaving that here for a few seconds.
Kaushi, we have a question from Ashka. Ashka, go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is, when you said that, you do journaling and all of that, I do agree and I kind of do follow it as well. But I really think, I don't know how can I see the results happening in the real world, because I also feel that your performance in the corporate world is judged a lot on the basis, or like your performance is judged on a basis of how hard you work or what you show in terms of results. And I don't know how my journaling or my authenticity is going to contribute to this particular path. And I have been trying to journal for a while. And yeah, it does help reflect on how my actions are building up, what I can do or improve or something. But I don't really see the impact on a larger scale. So if you could please explain me how the image is actually not a part of the performance and that it is a separate entity.
Yeah. So a very, very great question, because I think it touches upon the essence of, again, we always associate effort with results and we're looking for something very instant. So let me tell you, this is going to be an uphill climb. Ashka, did I pronounce it right?
Ashka, yeah.
Ashka. Yeah, so Ashka, this is going to be an uphill journey. But the pretext of this journey is when you start journaling, right? You start to understand yourself better. And when you find yourself in events, in organizations, you're going to be in places where you're going to be triggered. When you've had this internal dialogue, you show up with confidence. I'm going to be addressing this in the following slides, where people very unconsciously judge you for two traits, which is competence and warmth. It's just unbelievable. So your journaling helps you cleanse your energy and carry yourself with warmth and radiance. And this is not a measurable trait, but when you're in the room, you're with people, you gravitate towards people, and you'll see this as results for yourself. Watch yourself over a period of time. While you've been on this journey, the quality of energy that you bring into every room would be a differentiator. So it's like this, right? You're great on performance, you're great on image, you're great on exposure. It's the pie, the three characteristics of career success, right? And then there is this very unconscious thing that's happening among people is warmth. Where do you see yourself fit in? And I think the challenge with a lot of us is we hear concepts, we adopt them, but then we're unsure, how would this translate into action at some point in time? Or how does this translate into result? I guess that's where it's so important to trust the process. So earlier, this is more like a very interesting statement. Everyone's saying to trust the process. But I think when you start recognizing the importance of everyday effort, it will have a compounding interest on the journey that you are in. So journaling, the highlights, right? One is clarity of thought. Your confidence comes from clarity. So it's not like, I want to be confident. So for example, and without dwelling too much into it, I have a friend who travels extensively. She is going to crush a travelogue post. I won't be able to do that Because guess what? I don't operate with clarity in the space. Firstly, I don't travel as extensively as my friend does. She's traveling every other week. But for me, travel is a curated experience. It happens now and then. But if you're going to talk about personal growth, I do that every day. That's an integral part of my journey. You ask me to talk about the topic, I would do that. Confidence, but it comes from a space of clarity. So now, in your work environment, what is that space you want to be seen as confident? And then go back and understand, where will that clarity come from? I hope this addresses a lot of people's questions as well, because I didn't want to be in a space where I'm just doing this monologue and want to sound intelligent, because that's not the intention, but to see how my experiences have helped me grow. And I think the statement that I always say is, how many rich people live a rich life? Okay, so now with that, we spent quite a bit of time on that discussion, and I'm really grateful for that question. Now we come to knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. So I'm hopeful you can see the values on the slide. Spend a few minutes on the slide, and I would encourage everyone to do this exercise. So from the slide, pick 15 values, okay? And do this as a very intuitive exercise without the need to overthink or over-engineer. You look at it, you get a glimpse of it. Okay, these are my values. Pick the 15 values, and from the 15, eliminate 10 values. And then you will arrive at the 5 values that's really, really close to your heart. So we could have a little discussion, but I would really encourage you to do this exercise now. I think I would give it about 2 minutes. Charu, is 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah. We're at 11:35 right now. So yes.
Another minute. So I do want to respect time for all of us. So we'll move ahead. we could focus on a discussion on this value generation model a little later, but I'm hopeful that all of us could get to our 5 values that we deeply connect with. This exercise was helpful because I think a lot of us in our journeys, like when you ask this loaded question, tell me a little bit about myself, it's so important to recognize a lot of this stems from your values. And I think getting to this morning with you would mean this exercise that much more meaningful than to just say personal branding is intentional living, but what are your values and how do you go about discovering that for yourself? So moving on to the next slide, which is, I think, another important thing that I want to stay focused on. While values influence a lot of your decisions, everyday decisions, your beliefs are set, your thought processes. And a belief that's really, really helped me, and I want to share this with you, is the quality of your life depends on the quality of questions you ask yourself. I repeat, the quality of your life depends on the quality of questions you ask yourself. So, and because we had a recent discussion on the importance of journaling. Now, so people could just say, yeah, journaling is important, but how am I going to internalize this? That's a very important question to ask. So, and I would encourage everyone to do that. And I apply this always because it literally comes down to what opportunities do I want to attract? Why does writing on social media matter so much to me? Why do I talk about well-being so much? Because something that I learned over a course of time is we all live identities where we feel the need to comply to the extent that we compromise on our values, comply to the extent that we want to align ourselves with what's most popular and what's most trending, without understanding how does this play into my space. So as much as I walk you through all of this, I would genuinely encourage you to sit down and reflect on what part of this applies to my journey in the current space that I am in, and how do I want to integrate this, and what is the change I want to integrate starting today. That's a very important question to ask yourself. So who am I? Deep down, what matters to me? During which activities do I feel most alive? What makes me great? How do I get people excited about who I am? What new things would I pursue? These are very important questions to ask because it gives you a measure of how are you being perceived by people, the image part of it, and do you enjoy exposure? So for instance, there's an opportunity tomorrow. You enjoy credibility, but do you enjoy visibility? You do great work. I have absolute faith in the work that you do, but do the decision makers know, the influencers know that you're somebody who can contribute to this space? You are the differentiator. You are the connector here. How do you ensure you make that happen? It's really your onus. And to say that, I don't really care what people think about me is an interesting conversation to have when you know for a fact you're not compromising on your values, when you're okay being misunderstood for the right reasons. But if you feel in your space, the work that you do, you need to be remembered as someone creative, and you believe you need to be creative, but the stakeholders don't perceive you as creative, what are things that you will start doing differently? Another example is, as leaders, it's very important to be very effective in your communication. I think that's really, it's like the cornerstone for a lot of discussions that happen. Now, if that's an area where people don't highlight your strength, is that important for you? Or you'll say, I don't care. Or, I care. And what can I make? What's the conscious effort I'll make? Because at the end of the day, it's so important to remind yourself these are skills, and skills are learnable. We often get lost in the conversation. She's so talented. She's so gifted. And honestly, that's really not how this works, right? There's an interesting anecdote about how Arjuna ended up being a great warrior. It was practice every day. So you can have talent, but if you're not practicing every day, you're not going to win those medals. And that's for every athlete. And that applies to us as employees of organizations, as people in our own business spaces tomorrow, as people in the families that we are part of organizations, right? Meaningful approaches to expanding your brand at work. So we've had an interesting insight about being intentional with our personal branding. We've had an insight about this is all research material. It's not like some people wake up in the morning and say, oh, personal branding is an interesting topic. There's a following, there's an influencer community. I want to be seen as very intelligent in this space. Okay, chalo, let's start doing the talking. No, that's really not what this is about, right? So how do you ensure you're visible at work? Toot your own orchestra. And what does that mean? Orchestra is the team that you're part of while you're working on a presentation or a project. And the intention is, how do you include I as part of your conversation? So for instance, Charu and I work together to ensure we cover the topic on, a lot of people say,
Kaushi, your voice, we can't hear you.
to Charu and I. So you have a very mindful way of integrating
Kaushi,
that.
Kaushi,
Yes?
we missed you for about a minute. Can you just repeat what you said? After you said Charu and I are on the same team, we lost you. There was a bandwidth issue.
Okay, so should I go off video?
Maybe.
Okay, so toot your own orchestra is in the lines of how do you ensure you are able to include your contributions as part of the project that you worked on? Because a lot of times you're expecting someone else to speak about us. So for instance, the example reference I was quoting is, Charu and I worked together to ensure we touch upon the most important key element, that personal branding is also for introverts. You see, I had a way of highlighting that, we worked on the project, but it was specific to address the importance of introverts. And we did this in partnership. So toot your own orchestra, how you had a contribution and a part to play. This is something that's very important. Focus on the facts. Another thing that we often forget is, while we share and highlight our achievements, I'm a team player, I'm a good presenter, doesn't really help. You have to highlight how your presentation contributed to whatever shift, how you being a team player helped you work on the project and not go overboard on your budget spends. So focus on the facts. That becomes more gratifying and looks less of a bragging effort there. Piggyback and praise. So there's a good chance in the journey that we are in, we don't start off at a senior level in an organization. So there's going to be people who are mentor material, who enjoy greater credibility and authority in the organization. So what do? You kind of find a way to highlight their contribution while you are part of that journey, so that when you have someone of credibility in your community, people's perception of you also shifts. And again, it's not manipulation, it's being mindful, because you've genuinely made a contribution and you genuinely see their work adding value. It's not people pleasing, but recognizing that their work is making a difference. Find initiatives and organizational goals that are aligned with your brand. So for instance, if you are somebody in the organization who likes being a part of the environmentally conscious culture, you like the approach of sustainable living, you like the approach of minimalistic living, are there initiatives that you can be a part of in the organization? So you are seen much more beyond your work. So again, you're contributing the image aspect of it. Are you intentional on how you are being perceived? So for me, when I was part of an organization earlier, like being a part of the Women's Council felt like the most relevant thing for me to do, because I connected with that cause. So likewise, go back and understand, are there causes that you can be a part of in the organization? Because you're also building your network that way. Connect with colleagues who have similar interests. It's not like you have to go out on your lunch meetings and networking meetings all the time. But I think striking a conversation on a one-on-one basis is a meaningful thing to do. For instance, an exercise that I found very valuable. And I remember, so you guys can look up Dory Clark. She's quite an expert on strategy. So she spoke about, I found that example beautiful. So she said, during festivals, she gave a reference of Christmas time. Everyone is writing Merry Christmas, have wonderful holidays, blah, blah, blah. There's a good chance your mail is going to be lost in that whole clutter box of emails. But be very mindful, maybe 1 month before the celebration or the vacation or whatever, find something very interesting to highlight about that person or their contribution, or how grateful you are about their interaction, or how their work makes a difference. Trust me, you will be remembered. The problem is we just feel like everyone's doing this, I need to do it, or I've not done it. And I think that made so much sense. This is a very interesting way to build your network and be mindful about your engagement with people. Create and share content on social media. It comes back to, I'm not very comfortable sharing on social media, and I get that. You don't have to start doing that. But can you start making an effort to start recognizing people's work that you think is making a difference in another person's world, and align yourself with that? Because at some point in time, these connections would make a difference. And the point that I'm getting to is, everyone needs an audience. You are somebody's audience, and that would be a very enriching enriching experience for the other person. So instead of saying, I'm not comfortable writing, I could genuinely encourage you to start journaling. Your voice will emerge. You will have a brand voice. And again, it comes back to how badly you want it. What is your mission or message you want to share with the world? For me, my mission, and why do I say my mission? Because it'll give you a sense of what that cause is. So when I did my value, identifying my values, something that jumped out for me was the well-being part. Why do I care about people speaking up? Because I noticed you could be very kind, but you could be mistreated. And you could carry resentment. And I think that's not the space we want to be in. And it got down to a very interesting space that when we're not speaking up for ourselves or our needs, we become an interesting field for illnesses and suffering. And I think I really work in the space like, what can I do differently to ensure people suffer less? Because don't we all wake up and make a choice as to, I want to be happy, which means you want to suffer less. But all of our actions are like, how do I suffer more? So I think that little realization helped me understand, here's a space you can make a difference. And people might not realize it when you start talking about it, Kaushi, and it's okay. But can you be on that journey so that it slowly starts to resonate with the audience? Again, it comes back to true belonging, which is, can I be part of something sacred, which is larger, and be okay to stand alone? And that discussion, I think, we can all start having. And like I said, it didn't happen overnight. My taglines, how bizarre they were to get to this space. How will personal branding help you? You become the go-to person in the area of expertise, and you're also differentiated from competition. So one is your stories, your narrative as to why you do what you do, and that's your differentiator. And when you're consistently focused on clarity, you also show up with confidence and you become the go-to expert. I don't know if you know this. Why do you want to hang around with people around you? Because there are people that exude confidence, and confidence is a very infectious energy. And coming back to the question, right? How do I influence without authority? This is one of the key focus areas of our discussion. Was we not necessarily will be in the position of power or influence. But if you're not in the position of power of influence, how do you increase your influence? It's your competence and your warmth. And then you become a magnet for opportunities. Now, here's a quote which really summarizes all that we talked about is, the biggest predictor of success isn't network size. So don't, we all get bogged like, I don't have a community, I don't have a following, I'm not an influencer. It's whether people tend to walk away from you feeling more enthused a little more excited about what you are up to and what they're up to. So this comes back to the warmth, the energy part of our engagement. Every interaction is energy exchange. Once we start recognizing that, the question you'll ask yourself is, do you show up enthusiastically? So now it's not like, I don't have my drag days or I wake up feeling joyful every day. But I think something that really helped me understand the space was like, I have no assurance that I will wake up tomorrow. And I think for me, the lessons that I picked during the global lockdown was something that I hold very closely, is because I remember having this conversation with God where it was like, if my parents pass away, I should at least be able to get to the funeral, because that was what is happening around us. You couldn't go for funeral of your respective loved people. It literally got down to that. So I think that little reflection helped me understand that if you're not mindful about our internal dialogue, there's a good chance we're going to wake up feeling unhappy about the choices made in life. So yeah, energy. It's not like there's absence of trouble, but how do you show up? What's your attitude? And your personal brand is your public persona. And at periodic intervals, try and address these questions. How do others describe you? The three compliments people often give you. What are strengths that others acknowledge in you? Because sometimes if you ask this question, what are your strengths? There's a good chance we're going to withdraw into silence like, what? Yeah. So I am privy to that. I have done that myself. But when you start being mindful and strategic about the interactions that you start having with people, they will give away cues, and try and understand if the strength that they acknowledge in me is the strength that I see in myself as well. And that little journey is a very helpful journey to be on, and not with an intention to fit in. I repeat, true belonging. So in 2023, let's be fearless about advocating for ourselves and others. So instead of being misled by the idiom that empty vessels make the most noise, which is not really the case, learn to speak up for yourself, be vocal. And the way to do it is make this about your audience, make this about how can I make a difference? What is my energy levels? Am I enthused about it? And I think when you start becoming very passionate, when you understand what your passion areas are, you also start showing up confidently because you work from a space of clarity. And the reframe that I think I want to leave you with is, I am ready to be visible and vulnerable, right? So because you can be great at your work, but if people are not aware of your presence, which is your exposure part, no matter what image you have, it's really not going to fetch you too far. And something that I often remind myself is like, Rome wasn't built in a day, but they were laying bricks every hour. So with that, we're open for questions, observations. I love reflections. If I've not said this out loud, I'd repeat and reiterate that. So I'm happy to have that conversation.
Kaushi, can you stop sharing your screen?
Done.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes left and there's a question, but Malti, just in case you want to add on quickly, you said, I've been trying to rebuild my career, personal brand, but I want to find the balance between my own skills and what I've been through. I think we've covered that to great detail, but is there anything you want to ask in addition?
I think, because I asked it earlier on, a lot of what we've gone through, but I feel that for myself, I am still trying to find that middle ground, because when I move on to a new career, I still bring up a lot of what I have gone through, and my confusion, my challenge is I don't want that to overshadow the skills and my own ability to bring to whatever new career that I'm going in. I hope that that is a good explanation.
Okay, so Kaushi, Malti, then in particular, what's your question? What would you like us to really that one answer you're looking for?
I think it's more in terms of how do we, in personal branding, how do we put the boundaries in terms of what we want to share and what, because sometimes when we share, the other person might also judge or, be able to think of something else that you might not even want to convey. So how do we put that boundaries?
Shahrukh, can I take that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So Malti, that's beautiful because I think you start to understand this by practice. And I'll give you a reference point of my example is, so something that I learned was, I remember someone had broke into the house. I lost my jewelry and I had to get into work on that day to do a presentation. And I'm absolutely disoriented, but I go and do the presentation. But it was a very half-hearted job. And my boss pulls me up also almost indicating, hey, listen, I gave you this project and assignment to deliver because you're good at it. Like, what happened? And I started crying. And at that point, I just felt like now I'm finding an excuse for having not done the presentation very well. To that which he said, Kaushi, if only you had told me or shared that this was an episode this morning, I would have probably done it myself. So I think that was my lesson one is like, recognize who do you want to be vulnerable with? And it comes with time and practice. It really, you start to get intuitive after a point about who you want to share this with. And I also learned the importance of, by not sharing my story or my journey, I'm depriving somebody else of their growth. The minute you start looking at that space from a space of how you're depriving somebody else of their growth and progress, you're going to have an internal voice which will help you articulate this much better. That's 2. 3 is, it's a choice you make. Like, to be very honest with you, I was so tempted to put my friend's picture and talk about it as part of why I want to do this, but I just felt I might just break down. I was so not ready for it. I put that picture and I withdrew it. So I think it's really about having that dialogue with yourself without needing to put pressure on yourself. And I think an example that really helps me is pressure is from outside, okay? You're going to deal with pressure. How do you respond from the inside? Is it stress or are you feeling joyful? I often do this little exercise with myself because then I know if it's stress, Kaushi, you're not ready for it. Give it some time. There's no hurry. If by sharing, I'm going to feel joyful, yeah, I'm okay if people are going to judge me. So I think this little exercise really helped me, Malti.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for your sharing earlier. I learned a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Kaushi, can we take one more question?
Sure.
Yeah. So 1 second. We have Sita who's asked, how do we overcome our inferiority complexes?
So could you repeat that again?
1 second. Sita, can you ask your question directly? Because it's gonna.
Okay. So can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So basically, like regarding creating personal brands, especially like in social media, we like think like I don't have anything to post or I don't have any thing special or any content, and we feel inferiority complex that that even though I have knowledge, but what to post or what, like it feels like having a complex and we don't post anything. So how to overcome those kind of stuffs, and that is something that always like keeps me behind, that I want to post but it feels like I don't have anything to post.
Okay.
Yeah.
So based on my experience around inferiority complex, something that you need to ask yourself is, where is that voice coming from? Is this your voice or is this projected onto you from the community or the society? Because as much as you would, I like the phrase that No one can make you feel inferior unless you choose to. It's a very interesting phase. But if you've not understood yourself, this phrase is going to remain a phase. And I think that is where, and again, I think I'm going to share a little personal story as like, I think as a child, we come from a community that the girls are really, really fair. I didn't fit into the mold of being fair. And I always felt that I was not good enough. Okay. And it just went into the phase that I didn't like going for social gatherings. I would tend to fall sick because now they're going to ask my mom questions like, oh, is your daughter as pretty and fair as you? And for a 6-7-year-old, that those conversations were heavy, those emotions were heavy. And I think as you start growing up, you start to recognize how we all base our self-worth on perceptions that others form of us. I think understanding that is very important. It goes back to values. And another thing that I always tell people is, this is another interesting example. This is your self-esteem. Who are you at the core? And suppose I've come here and done a great presentation, my confidence is going to feel good, okay? It's like the bark of the tree. But sometimes maybe I've not done a great presentation and it chips off. My confidence levels drops. But irrespective of what that external event is, do I hold myself gently, compassionately? Do I love myself enough? I think there's a very interesting principle here that we love ourselves greatly, but our level of self-acceptance is the lowest, which is why a lot of us, and not making a generalized statement, we struggle with inferiority complex because we love ourselves greatly, but our level of acceptance is super, super low. So I think the intention is to increase that, the need, not the need, but the affection that you have for yourself, increase that. And then you will start seeing a shift. And I go back to this is, it is more in terms of your internal dialogue, because the dialogue that people have fed into you becomes your internal dialogue. And if you've spent enough time, you will find enough people telling you, and you'll play the role, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to write, I'm not good enough to share, I'm not good enough to present. Do I know enough to present? Why would people want to listen to me? It's having that internal dialogue every day and making the effort. It's not just having that dialogue, right? It's making the effort. So to your question on the inferiority complex of, I don't have anything great to share, I think I would go back and encourage you to use the 3-pronged approach for the framework, which is, what are your struggles? What lessons did you pick up from those struggles? And can this make a difference in someone's life? And I have a strong belief that it would.
All right. I know there are some more questions still coming through, but we are up for time. So thank you so much, Kaushi, for being with us and sharing these great insights. And just a question, there are some people who still have questions for you. So can they connect with you? What's the best way to connect? On LinkedIn?
I think what you could do is, this came as guidance, right? I'd say, yeah, do that. But maybe, Charu, get these questions, okay?
Yeah, and send them through to you.
And honestly, I think I want to commit, it may be too premature, but I want to spend some time understanding those questions. And if you think would benefit the larger audience, I could share it. I could find a way to do it, but happy to have a cumulative set.
All right. So Saloni, Anuradha, please write to me and I will share these with Kaushi, and we promise to get back to you. And another thing is, we're very happy to announce Mufina and Lakshmi are our 2 lucky winners from today's session, who will be getting a one-on-one mentoring session in addition to the session with Kaushi. So Mufina and Lakshmi, please can you email me? I have your email IDs, but just to be sure we don't lose you. And Lakshmi, thanks for also adding in your 9-year-old son who's very keen to learn about personal branding. And it's his birthday also in May. So Lakshmi is going to pass on all that knowledge early on in life. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for joining us. And have a great week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a spectacular day and just recognize the importance of being intentional every moment. It'll become an innate part of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.